Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving straight into the fitness industry's absolute biggest myth today, and we're going to completely rebuild your approach to working out. If you've been frantically searching for the absolute bare minimum amount of exercise required to see results, hey, you're definitely not alone. But today, we're unpacking the hard science that proves exactly why volume beats the minimal dose every single time.
Let's kick things off with a slightly provocative question. Ask yourself, are you actually working out smarter, or are you just undertraining? If you're frustrated by workout plateaus, your alluring, quote-unquote, time-efficient routine might actually be the root of the problem. We are constantly sold this idea that we can hack our way to peak physical fitness in just a few minutes a day, but human physiology is a bit more demanding than that. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the minimal dose myth, the raw power of volume, how to split your workload, the stretch advantage, fueling that volume, and finally, the ultimate tier 0. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The minimal dose myth, time-efficient versus evidence-based. Look, we're all short on time. That's just a universal truth. So the idea of a minimal effective dose sounds pretty amazing to health-conscious people who just want to get in, get out, and get on with their day. Because of this, for years, there was this overarching fear of an inverted, U-shaped response to exercise. The fear was basically that if you push past a certain minimal threshold, your results will suddenly plummet, and the extra work will literally destroy your gains. But the literature, it completely debunks this myth. The reality shown in the research is a rock-solid, scientifically proven dose-response relationship. This means that rather than hitting a sudden wall, increasing your training volume directly yields greater physiological benefits. More work, within reason, equals more results.
Moving on to Section 2, the power of volume, the easily modifiable variable. If you take just one thing away from this explainer, make it this. Volume, which is simply your reps multiplied by your sets, multiplied by the load you lift, is the single most easily modifiable variable in your entire routine. And it happens to have the absolute strongest evidence-based response in the literature. Your new baseline? It's a massive number, 10. Meta-analyses show you need a minimum of 10 weekly sets per muscle group just to maximize hypertrophy, or muscle growth. And here's the crazy part. Researchers haven't even found a definitive ceiling where higher volume causes detrimental effects. So hitting 10 sets is the baseline, but going beyond it doesn't suddenly ruin your progress. It actually opens the door for even greater adaptations.
And please, don't go thinking this is just about aesthetics or looking good at the beach. High volume is literally potent medicine. High volume resistance training actively lowers resting systolic and diastolic blood pressure. It reduces postprandial lipemia, which is just a fancy academic way of saying it clears out the triglycerides in your blood after you eat. Plus, it combats anabolic resistance in the elderly and is basically a mandatory prescription for fighting sarcopenia, that age-related loss of muscle mass. You just can't get those kinds of bulletproof health protections from a low-volume routine.
All right, Section 3. Splitting the workload. Optimizing the 10-set minimum.
So we've established that volume is king and that you need at least 10 sets per muscle group. But how exactly do you distribute those sets across your week? Do you do them all on Monday? Do you space them out? Well, a major systematic review and meta-analysis on training frequency answers this perfectly. When researchers equated for total weekly volume, meaning everybody did the exact same amount of total work, the data heavily favored training a muscle group more frequently.
To translate those numbers into plain English, hitting a major muscle group twice a week results in a 6.8% mean change in muscle growth. Isolating it just once a week, like your classic bro split where Monday is strictly chest day, well, that yields only 3.7% growth. So by simply taking that same high volume and splitting it into 2 sessions a week, you're nearly doubling your muscle growth. Double, just from splitting it up.
Which brings us to Section 4, the stretch advantage, maximizing biological tension.
Okay, so you're doing the volume, hitting the 10-set minimum, splitting it up twice a week, but what if you're still plateauing? You might be missing out on a massive biomechanical hack called stretch-mediated hypertrophy. This is muscle growth stimulated by loading a muscle under tension in a deeply stretched position. And what happens at the cellular level here is honestly mind-blowing. When you're in a deep stretch, a giant protein in your muscles called titin, along with your connective tissue, resists that stretch. It creates this passive tension. And that passive tension uniquely activates hypertrophy signaling pathways completely independent of the active force you generate when you just lift the weight.
Want to implement this biomechanical hack right now? Here's the process. Step 1. Pick exercises that load the muscle in its lengthened or stretched position. Step 2. Perform your standard full range of motion volume. And Step 3. This is the real kicker. Add lengthened partials at the very end of your set when you have some energy left over. Basically, do just the stretched half of the movement when you're too exhausted to pull off a full rep. Exploit that stretch position and watch a muscle that's been stubbornly stuck for years finally start growing again.
Section 5. Fueling your volume. Nutritional foundations and ceilings.
Of course, all this high-volume, deep stretch training, it's completely useless if you aren't properly fueling your biological recovery. You've got to feed the machine, but you have to do it smartly based on how human morphology actually works. Supplements are not magic. They follow very strict biological ceilings. For example, the dose-response pattern for protein is curvilinear. That means it goes up and then it flattens right out. Protein intake actually maxes out at a ceiling of about 1.6 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Once you hit that ceiling, dumping more protein powder into your shake doesn't equal infinite gains, it literally just equals expensive digestion. The exact same thing goes for leucine, which plateaus at 2 to 3 grams per meal.
And let's talk about creatine, arguably the most popular supplement on the planet. If you step on the scale after a week of taking it and see it jump, don't be fooled. That early body mass is just fluid retention. It's water weight. True structural myofibrillar hypertrophy, actual solid muscle tissue, is a slow, grueling biological process. It requires 8 to 12 plus weeks of sustained high-volume overload. Creatine is a fantastic performance amplifier that helps you do the volume for sure, but the actual morphological changes, those take months. Finally, Section 6, the ultimate Tier 0, progressive overload. Let's synthesize all this science, the frequency data, the stretch mechanisms, the nutritional ceilings, into one unified reality about human physiology and fitness. There's a quote from the nutritional research that perfectly captures our foundational Tier 0. It says, "No supplementation can substitute for inadequate training progression. You cannot hack, you cannot supplement, and you absolutely cannot minimal dose your way out of doing the actual voluminous work. The bedrock of everything we've talked about today is progressive overload, doing more volume over time."
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. The evidence is undeniably clear that volume beats the minimal dose every single time. It drives better hypertrophy, it protects your metabolic health, and it builds serious resilience as you age. The minimal dose is a myth born out of convenience, not science. The only question left is, are you going to keep searching for the easy way out,